Hi, and welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Leading the Way in Education. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you insightful discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and trends in entrepreneurship. As a former middle school teacher turned corporate communications executive, I'm here to share how my experience with corporate clients and as a business owner can and should influence the way we think about marketing and the educational ecosystem, what's working, what isn't working, and how to change the paradigm of public versus private once and for all. In today's episode, we're focusing on the business of volunteers, what they're worth, how to motivate them, and where to find them. Some current statistics might surprise you. If you or someone is involved in a school or nonprofit organization that struggles to leverage volunteers, we hope some of our insights today will help. So let's get started by breaking down the economics. According to Independent Sector, the current value of a volunteer hour is $31.80, and 1/3 of the nonprofit workforce is made of volunteers. 1/3 of an entire industry of workforce is made of volunteers. According to Philanthropy Roundtable, about 25% of the adult population, that is 63 million Americans, volunteer their time and energy. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, people between the ages of 35 and 54 are most likely to volunteer their time. So, given the sheer number and scope of the number of volunteers out there who are ready and willing to donate their time, what does that translate to nonprofits? It seems like there are plenty of people available. It's clear who's most likely to volunteer and how much their work is worth. 25% of the adult population is reporting they volunteer their time, but why is it still so difficult to find the right volunteers to support nonprofit organizations to scale? For the past 8 years, volunteer managers have cited that recruitment is their greatest challenge. And we're going to talk more about that in this episode. 62% of nonprofits state that recruiting volunteers is a quote-unquote big problem. So let's dig into that. According to a report from Stanford University Center for Longevity, 90% of adults report a desire to volunteer, but only 25% of American adults do. So what's the problem? They're ready and willing, but at the same time, they don't commit. The 3 most common reasons for not following through in volunteering reported as: 1, quote, I don't have enough time and volunteer schedules are way too inflexible. More than half of respondents actually reported this. The second was no one asked me to. 25% of respondents reported that. And third, I don't have enough information and most volunteer roles aren't interesting. But let's be honest. These may or may not be the actual real reasons, right? It might be what people are reporting to say, but let's really dive in. If we were to peel away the onion, are those really the real reasons? But to best understand how to overcome these obstacles, again, we need to best understand people's motivations. In a survey of over 7,000 U.S. volunteers, 66 of respondents volunteer to improve their community. 83% do so to contribute to a cause they care about, and more than 35% of respondents said that one of the reasons they volunteer is simply to socialize. Yes, I know that these numbers do not add up to 100, so my really intent listeners are going to call me on it. 83, 35, and 66 do not have up to 100, but obviously the respondents in the survey could choose more than one option. But let's talk about those first 2 numbers. 66% of respondents volunteer to improve their community, and 83% do so to contribute to a cause they care about. So let's break those down. How can organizations best meet volunteer expectations, understanding these 2 motivations? We know that it starts with a really strong brand identity. In fact, 93% of nonprofits who were surveyed believe that a strong brand identity has a positive impact on donor engagement. Here at Kindula, we partner with nonprofits whose mission is to improve their visibility in their community, their reputation, build strong partnerships. And all of this comes back to brand, which we 100% believe in. Your vision, mission, values, and your brand identity all play into really the impact you can have and the way that you're able to attract those that can follow in your mission. We Volunteer engagement actually leads to organizational success. So if you are in a place where you've got a strong brand and it has the ability to recruit like-minded individuals who share the same mission, and all of that is clear, you are in a very strategic position to be able to recruit the best volunteers out there who really align with your mission, vision, and values. And here's a few ways that helps you. First, and it can enhance your capacity. Volunteers contribute their time, their skills, their expertise, and thereby expanding the organization's capacity to fill its mission and objectives. These valuable resources complement the efforts of paid staff members, allowing the organization to achieve more with limited resources. Again, I go back to the average cost of a typical volunteer is around, what did I say, $31.80. That's significant when you think about the more volunteers you can bring in to really amplify and build on the capacity that you currently have. It can also aid in increasing visibility and awareness of your organization and the impact that you have in your community. It can raise public awareness of your mission and its programs. Organizations can generate positive publicity by attracting media attention, reaching new audiences, by supporting their cause. So think about a 5K, an annual gala, or any other signature nonprofit event. And then finally, capacity building. Just volunteer engagement provides opportunities for skills development, training, and leadership experiences. If you can bring on volunteers who have a specific expertise in a certain area and help them train even your existing staff, that can really empower your whole organization to take on leadership roles, expand capabilities, and contribute to the organization's long-term sustainability. But again, going back to the number one challenge is recruitment. How do we bring new volunteers in? Where do we find them? So let's talk about some effective ways to recruit volunteers, especially given that it's one of the most challenging aspects of running a nonprofit. And if you're experiencing this and you are an executive director of a nonprofit and you're like, how can I find volunteers? Other organizations seem to be getting them and I'm not true. It's across the board a challenge. So let's dig into how do we solve for this? First, reach out to corporate partners. Consider volunteer grant programs. We're going to dive into both of these really quick. Most companies encourage employees to volunteer as part of their corporate social responsibility initiatives, which have been growing over the last decade. We've also discussed this phenomenon in recent episodes. So partnering with businesses in your community to promote volunteer opportunities to their employees and offering group volunteer activities or corporate volunteer days is something you can easily be able to offer corporate partners who might be interested. There are volunteer grants too, so let's talk about that. Also known as Dollars for Doers. Volunteer grants are a corporate giving initiative where companies actually donate to nonprofits after their employees have volunteered with those organizations for a specific amount of time. So they might say, our employees are going to come to you, all 250 of them, for an entire day. And as a result of doing their work, we will contribute the X number of dollars on behalf of them and their time. It's a great way to both engage your employees in actually doing the work and also following through as an organization to put your money where your mouth is and say, and yes, as an organization, we double down on this effort and help support this cause. 40% of Fortune 500 companies today offer volunteer grant programs. 80% of companies that have volunteer grant programs provide between $8 to $15 per hour volunteered. If you think about that, an organization is not only paying for that employee's time and taking that day off to do the work for a great cause, but then they're also on top of it paying an additional hourly rate to the organization itself. And 65% of US companies offered volunteer time off in 2022. So again, by organizations giving their employees a day off to do this paid helps to expand the impact that they have in their community. Another example is the Disney Volunteers EARS grant program allows employees to request dollars for doers grants for the nonprofits they volunteer with. Since the program's inception in 1983, Disney Volunteers have offered about 13 million hours of volunteer time. Additionally, Disney has contributed about $23 million in dollars for doers grants over the past decade. 82% of businesses say their employees want the opportunity to volunteer with peers in a corporate supported event. If you think about how this can be perceived as an employee engagement opportunity, a time to build culture, to build cause within the organization, really the investment that you make in your employees to be able to do that not only pays off for you as an organization and your overall cause and your culture, but also for the employee themselves. And businesses stand to gain from partnerships too. A well-managed corporate responsibility program has the potential, get this, to increase revenue by up to 20% and productivity of their employees by 13%. So right there, it deserves a second look, at least. It definitely deserves a second look. Another strategy to recruit new volunteers is to consider partnering with schools and universities near you. According to recent data, both students and nonprofit organizations benefit from hosting student volunteer programs. Nonprofits can collaborate with educational institutions to tap into a pool of students and faculty members who are very eager to contribute to their communities. And let's face it, students particularly do not have a lot of obligations other than going to class, hanging out with friends, and certainly volunteer opportunities can provide them a great opportunity to leverage that in resumes for future opportunities. According to a study, students who performed voluntary community service were actually 19% more likely to graduate from college than those who didn't. Youth who volunteer are most likely to feel connected to their communities and do better in school and less likely to engage in risky behavior, which seems to make sense. The less time they have to engage in risky behavior by actually contributing to a good cause. Another study found that volunteering was associated with a 27% higher odds of employment. So one example, UCLA boasts a network of nearly 55,000 student volunteers and alum, totaling 355,000 hours of volunteer service. I'm partial to the UCLA example because my son is actually a sophomore at UCLA now, and I do know that he does a tremendous amount of volunteering. He sends me lots of pictures and lots of updates on the things he does specifically with the Boys and Girls Club. Another example, though, is 5,300 UC Berkeley undergrads engage in off-campus public service projects and programs annually. So again, a very ready and willing audience if you need additional volunteers is the college crowd. California has announced a new college service program called Californians for All College Corps. It's going to give eligible students $10,000 in exchange for 450 hours of volunteer work during an academic year. Up to 6,500 college students will be enrolled over the program's first 2 years beginning in fall 2022, according to the source highereddive.com. Another suggestion is to make sure you have a well-crafted volunteer page on your website with all of the opportunities available to people. Provide clear information about the roles available, the time commitments, and how to apply. Make it super, super easy for potential volunteers to sign up or inquire further about additional opportunities. More than 2/3 of charities, that's 68%, about say a strong visual brand increases volunteer interest. And 93% of nonprofits believe that a strong brand identity has a positive impact on donor engagement. So think about that when you're crafting your volunteer page on your website. Make sure that the visual identity the logo, the colors, what you can engage with is super easy, super identifiable, and very strategic. If you need any support on this, Candula and Candula's branding team are poised to support and jump in and help you really think strategically about your message and about the visuals and how you really can maximize the number of volunteers who to convert when they come to your website. And also consider tapping into free resources. Here are some interesting ones. Utilize online volunteer matching platforms, such as Volunteer Match or Points of Light Engage. It used to be called formerly All for Good, but it's now engage.pointsoflight.org. Engage.pointsoflight.org. And these platforms connect volunteers with nonprofit organizations based on interests, skills, and location, and they are 100% free for nonprofits. Volunteer Match is actually home to more than 13 million volunteers. And on July 31st, 2019, Volunteer Match celebrates its 14 millionth nonprofit volunteer connection. So if you're not already on those platforms, if you haven't already checked them out, please do, because if you are a nonprofit organization looking to leverage volunteers or recruit more, it makes so much sense for you to look at these free resources first to see if they can really help you. And it's one thing to recruit, but it's another thing to retain, right? So you've recruited new volunteers. How do you keep them? How do you keep them engaged? Let's talk about that. It really starts with creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for volunteers. Foster this environment where volunteers feel valued, appreciated, and respected. They are volunteering their time. Their time means money. If we go back to the beginning, what did we say? An average volunteer hourly is $31.80. That's significant. Show gratitude for their contributions. Verbal praise, written thank you notes, small tokens of appreciation, awards, all of these really help in establishing that culture of inclusivity and encouragement and appreciation. But also establishing clear expectations and providing any necessary training. The last thing you need is for volunteers to come in, they're all ready to go, they're super excited, but yet they don't have the training needed or they don't have the skills in order to really create the impact that they want to create. So offer comprehensive training to volunteers to equip them with knowledge and the skills that they need to perform their roles effectively. But then ongoing support and supervision and feedback, helping them succeed in their positions, succeed and also in the process of succeeding, what does that do to the individual? It helps them feel like they're making an impact. And at the end of the day, what we do know about the motivation for volunteers, if we go back to the beginning on the data that we talked about, was really wanting to contribute to an organization in an impactful way. So recognize and celebrate their contributions. Acknowledge their achievements and their milestones. Highlight their contributions. Consider your newsletters, social media posts, recognition ceremonies. All of these are fantastic opportunities to establish a volunteer recognition program with awards and incentives. But for the long term, it's also important to understand common reasons for turnover, because at the end of the day, like long term, it's not realistic that we're going to keep this same hundreds of volunteers over 10 years or more. So let's understand the reasons for volunteer turnover. According to an American Core study, the national average for volunteer retention rates hovers somewhere around 65%. So certainly based on that, we know that implementing strategies to enhance volunteer satisfaction and retention are super critical. According to a recent survey, key factors influencing volunteer satisfaction include recognition, which we talked about, making sure people are recognized for the time that they're committing to and just their skills and their experience, a respectful and trustworthy culture, and super important, a feeling of belonging to a group. There are some extremely critical actions that all organizations should take to keep their best people. So write these down, note these. Seek and act on feedback. Solicit feedback from volunteers on their experiences and suggestions for improvement and areas where they feel they can contribute further. You don't know if you don't ask. So act on this feedback by making necessary adjustments. There might be an opportunity where they want to be able to contribute to a new area of the organization, which you didn't even consider, but you recognize that, wow, if I did have that talent or that experience in this area, we could really scale even further. We could have a bigger impact. So be open to that feedback. Show flexibility and appreciation. So recognizing that volunteers, they have other commitments and obligations. Like they have other things outside of this and they are giving of their time. Be flexible and accommodate them with scheduling activities and events takes place. Maintain regular communication, keeping them informed about organizational updates, upcoming events, and opportunities for involvement can really help them feel like they belong, that they're in the organization. Just receiving regular communication through newsletters, emails, meetings, and social media channels really allows them to feel like they haven't been forgotten. They are an important part of the organization and what the organization brings to the community. And finally, provide meaningful volunteer opportunities. So ensuring that they're engaged in a meaningful and fulfilling work that aligns with interests, skills, and values. So maybe consider surveying them about the areas. What are their best strengths? What are the areas that they personally feel that they contribute the best? And then offer a variety of roles and projects to best cater to those different preferences and abilities. There are so many ways to really maximize volunteer time, but it does take, a thoughtful, strategic initiative to do that. And I hope that we've provided some insights and some thoughts that make you think about how you can do it better. But if you have any questions about how to create the best fundraising strategy for organization, how do you create the best opportunity to engage volunteers, recruit them, engage them, motivate them, we hope that we can help you. We'd love to support you in that journey. And best of luck on your path. Love working with nonprofits. Just the passion and the expertise that they bring to communities and their ability to really solve on a local level issues that come up in local communities that need to be addressed. It's just the agility and the expertise is just so fascinating, and we love working with nonprofits. So we hope that if you need any help or support at all, please reach out to us and our team at info@candulacommunications.com. And that's all we have for you today. Please join us next week for another new episode. If you want to join our incredible community of nonprofit leaders, please reach out to us at team@candulacommunications.com. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in.